We are interviewing one of our three composers who are finalists for our first composition competition here at the North State Symphony. And these three composers are part of what is called Beethoven Idol, which during the Masterworks concert in our 2021 season that we're able to do our finalist pieces, they will be part of a sort of a voting between the orchestra and a virtual and in-person audience. So we're excited about the whole process, and we're excited to learn more about all of our finalists. And today I have with me Kent Baker. And Kent, great to have you.
Hi, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, thank you for joining me. And I just want to, get to know a little bit about your background, especially your influences as a composer and all of that. So if we could just start out, maybe you could tell us how you got to where you are now as a composer, maybe include when you started music, things like your first instrument, and what really drew you to composition.
Well, my first instrument was the French horn, and I've been playing the French horn professionally since 1985. I played in high school like everybody else. I picked the instrument because it was the last one left when we got to pick instruments. So it wasn't so much as an affinity as happenstance. Um, I went to Illinois State University, and I became the director of bands at Central Catholic High School in Bloomington, Illinois, where I also played third horn with the Peoria Symphony Orchestra until 1995, when I joined the United States Air Force Band in Washington, D.C. as a hornist and eventually an arranger for the ceremonial brass, the marching component of the Air Force Band, and then a composer. And I've written for a variety of the 7 components in the Air Force Band over my 23-year career. I recently retired, and now I've gone back to school at George Mason University, and I'm studying composition with Mark Camphouse, one of our nation's finest wind band composers. As to how I got into composing, I've always wanted to know how the machine works. So I would, as a kid, even in junior high, I would take pieces apart and reassemble those parts compositionally to see how composers did what they did. And by the time I reached 8th grade, I was already writing the music for our graduation. So our band director was very empathetic to my mania and taught me a great deal about music theory. So I had quite a leg up going into college.
Well, that's great. Quite a background. And, I have a little experience with the Air Force Band. I actually auditioned in DC a couple times over a decade ago.
Was I on your audition? What's your instrument?
This was a conducting audition, but I'm a saxophonist. Oh. But I have fond memories. It's such an incredible group of musicians, and I remember doing the Roman Carnival Overture, which is it's interesting to see the differences when it's arranged for a band or wind ensemble versus the original orchestration. But yeah, no, that's such a great place to be. Would you say that you have a particular composer or a set of composers that have been sort of your greatest influences?
Anybody who knows me knows that I'm going to say the name Philip Glass before every other name. He has been more influential, not just as an American composer, because he is, I think, the greatest living American composer, but as an influence as to what music can be apart from its traditional nature. I think he is fascinating in the way that he, like Terry Riley or Pandit Pran or Lamont Young or John Adams or Steve Reich, they see music as a series of pattern recognition exercises. And when viewed on the long term, music becomes less of a melodic event, more of a textural event. He really opened my eyes to what music can be.
I love that, and I've always associated with composers like Philip Glass and Steve Reich and all of the minimalists and post minimalists. So I can certainly see that. And what's interesting about that is your piece is not exactly it's not minimalist at all, actually. So it's have a lot of pieces that you would say are more in the minimalist style?
A lot of the things I've written for commercial success. You know, when the Air Force
Hmm.
Band asks you to write something, you write something for the masses, and it's
Yeah.
programmatic and for a uh, very specific audience. And the same
Hmm.
is true when you submit something to a contest like this. It's not always a perfect representation of my art. It's art has the ability to allow us to process emotion. Right now, our country is in a series of crises. It's not lost on me that I am the single American in the finals of this competition. And you're interviewing me on a day when our country is burning. It's burning from
Yep.
an implacable virus that doesn't care about politics. It was 2 weeks ago, last Wednesday, 2 weeks ago Wednesday, that my father died of the coronavirus. So it's a very personal thing to me. Um, the funeral home where he died had virtually no protective equipment. So it feels like this was preventable.
Very sorry to hear about your father. That's horrible, horrible news. I mean, I can't
Well,
even imagine.
in a time like this, when our country is going through these crises, I believe that the solution is, and the solution will always be art, specifically music. Music has the unique ability to allow the listener to process emotion in real time in response to changing content. The ability to process emotion or how we feel over time, it can heal wounds. It can give perspective and allow for emotional growth, emotional maturity, and empathy. And to say that we need some empathy in our country is an understatement. I believe music is the answer to all of that. We need more art, not less art. And in a time where we can't get together and play, I love that we as musicians have found a way to make music virtual.
Yeah, yeah. It's nice to see so many different things going on, and that people are finding new ways to stay connected. And it's even interesting to see these ensemble performances that have been so carefully pieced together, and not an easy feat by any means. And what I really hope is that the technology continues. We can have actual large scale live performances in a setting like this, where we don't have to worry about all of the logistical and technical things that might go wrong along the way. But it's safe to say, I think, that when all of this has um, uh, dissolved into whatever this new, I don't know if I like this that's saying new normal, but when that happens, the things that have developed during this time will bleed over and complement all of the stuff that we've already been able to do in a physical, in a live environment. And that's exciting in a lot of ways, because it means we're reaching even more people through music. um, so it's great to hear that as a composer, especially with your particular set of influences, that you have such a flexibility when it comes the types of pieces that you write. Would you say that you have a preferred medium? Like, is orchestra your favorite medium to write for, or is it something else?
I guess I would have to limit it to acoustic instruments. While I
Hmm.
value the electroacoustic medium, whether it's orchestra or wind band, the substitution of strings or saxophones in an ensemble is almost immaterial to me. It's a fake distinction. I just love
Hmm.
the acoustic nature of an instrument. A person making the sound without electronic support. You know, obviously there's 1,000 years of history behind that. Well, I believe that we are at our best as musicians when we make the sounds ourselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know you said your primary instrument is horn. Um, do you also play piano?
I have played piano. I am terrible.
That makes two of us. So when you compose, what is the process like for you? Since you're obviously not one of those composers who's sitting at the piano doing so, I assume. So how do you go about the process itself?
Well, typically I will use the piano for composing. I'll have
Mhm.
my I set up with Finale. I'm Finale instead of Sibelius or
Yep.
Dorico, which is the new program. I'll have a piano off to one side, and because I'm right-handed, it's off to my right.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not great with two hands, but I'm pretty flexible with one hand. So I'll use the piano for ideas. I don't start with melodic content when I write. I think progressively. Um, John Williams has been a real influence. I guess if I have to say John Williams, I also have to say Gustav Mahler and Igor Stravinsky because they were influences on him. It
Oh
should
yeah,
be noted that today is the anniversary of
Rite of Spring.
the Riot of Spring riot in Paris. Yeah.
Absolutely. My favorite piece in the world, and that's a date that, just the magnitude of that date has influenced probably my entire professional life. So what a great day to have an interview like this. All things aside, I mean, this is such a historic day for music. Um, so if we take, chunking out tidbits on the piano and evolving a composition that way, and not necessarily starting with a melodic fragment. Maybe let's go to your piece, archetypes, and let's. How did you come up with this? What was the inspiration for this title, and also the program behind it?
In the Air Force, uh, we do a lot of multimedia work. Uh, we would write music for programmatic videos that are disseminated throughout the Air Force. So we would write music with a purpose. And I love soundtracks. My favorite soundtrack in the world is 13th Warrior. I love Krull. Most people never heard of a movie called Krull. You should look up the soundtrack. I love the pop soundtrack to 10 Things I Hate About You. So many soundtracks have affected us in so many ways because they're multimedia events. And I wanted Archetypes to be four soundtracks to movies that haven't been made. The first one
Mhm.
is obviously a Western, the second one being a fantasy movie, the third one a war movie, and the fourth one more of a dramatic narrative. And the fourth one does exhibit minimalist concepts of pattern repetition.
I appreciate that. And so as you were composing sort of archetype, each character, um, you said you don't really start with a melody, but how did each movement evolve? I mean, can you walk us through the process a little bit?
Well, the first thing I would do, let's take the first movement, the hero. Um,
Mhm.
every work of art and everything ever written has a germ of truth to it, a germ that we didn't create. There's not, Ecclesiastes says there is nothing new under the sun. So if I'm going to write something, I'll need, maybe some people need a motivation or an inspiration. For me, I wanted to watch westerns and hear how the orchestrations of some of the great heroic movies, the like Seahawk by Ernst Korngold, like that's kind of orchestration that has a very specific place in history. Um, so I'll put together the score and I'll write progressions that fit Korngold's textural narrative, and then I'll see what melodic concepts I can develop from there. So the first thing I'll do is try and get an inspiration for the orchestration, which for a lot of people is a secondary consideration. But for me, it has
Mhm.
to sound authentic.
Okay, okay. Um,
I hope that
so
answers your question. For some of the other movements, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, so it starts of more of uh, structural ideas. Can you envision like a specific set of instruments, and then the ideas sort of come from that?
That's correct. There's a very
Okay.
soloistic nature to that kind of writing because it personalizes an individual instead of an ensemble. More of an
Hmm.
ensemble film, um, like Star Wars, is clearly an ensemble film, and there are so many big evocative moments that uh, convey the scope of that movie. Whereas a lot of heroic movies specific to one person, like a John Wayne movie, will be very soloistic in nature.
Right,
Think
right.
True Grit.
Hmm. Hmm. Would you say, since we're talking about um, music that has character associations, would you say that there's any parallels with say this piece and something like a Wagner leitmotif or something like that, where sort of this idea keeps reoccurring throughout a work?
Yes, that's accurate. One of my favorite things to do in Beethoven fashion is to fragment the melody and
Mhm.
explore it in different key regions and in different orchestrations. So absolutely, that motif and secondary motif thing that you mentioned Wagner 2 3 years ago. National Opera did the entire Ring cycle here in DC, and I got to go see it.
Oh, that's amazing. I would love to experience the entire 15 to 16 hours live. I can't even imagine. Especially in a
Once in a
short
lifetime
sequence.
event.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's especially now. um, well, Kent, it's great to chat with you, and I very much look forward to exploring your piece next season and bringing it to life a little bit. And hopefully along the way we can introduce our audience to some of your other works leading up to those moments where our archetypes actually comes to life. So, any final thoughts?
I think it's a great opportunity for composers to expose new works to a new audience. So thank you for the opportunity, Scott.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. So, Kent, we look forward to hearing your work, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your day.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you.